Advocates against gun violence call it a historic day for gun safety. Honolulu Mayor Rick Blangiardi signed into law a bill that makes certain public areas off limits to firearms.
Schools, public parks, voter centers, and businesses with a liquor license are just some of the areas that'll become sensitive places. Those with the legal ability to carry a concealed weapon will be prohibited from doing so in those areas starting May 1st.
So what we did through the course of this hearing was we wanted to create a law where people wouldn't be inadvertently caught. So it's common sense things, schools, hospitals, parks. These are very, very clear places.
For businesses that aren't considered sensitive places, specific signage from the city is to be posted if owners want to allow guns on the property.
Now, businesses and charities that don't want to allow guns, again, that's going to be the default rule anyway, but they can post signs if they would like to.
I brought it up to the mayor. Does this bill target law-abiding citizens, not criminals?
You know, that's a really interesting question because I've listened to people describe scenarios that, quite honestly, are not the Hawaii that I know. Or for that matter, not the Hawaii that I want to see get created. We're not a gun-carrying society, and we're not going to do anything that's going to condone that, okay? And that's what this is about.
2 years later.
Hawaii's strict gun laws will soon be in the hands of the Supreme Court.
That's right. The highest court has agreed to hear arguments on a challenge of the laws that limit where concealed carry is allowed.
The U.S. Supreme Court will review Hawaii's 2023 firearms law, which bans concealed handguns in many public and private spaces.
Finally, the Supreme Court is going to take on a Second Amendment case which has serious implications across the country. Welcome to another installment of the Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC. P.A.N. Firearms, your NRA certification of multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website at www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box below. If you like channel, like content, what I do here, you can support the link. Everything's appreciated. Online store is open. CGB20 will get you 20% off. Fall is coming. I get these great hoodies. I still have a few of these left. I have some zip-ups. Actually, the zip-ups sell really fast. But CGB20 will get you 20% off, free shipping. Take advantage of that. Let's talk about this. And this is kind of exciting. Kind of. But the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments over Hawaii's sensitive places ban on carrying firearms for self-defense. This is kind of a big deal because there are a lot of states in the union that have these kind of restrictions. New York being one, where the entire downtown of Manhattan is a gun-free zone. But you notice that didn't really stop the guy that went to Midtown Manhattan to the NFL's headquarters there and pretty much committed a mass shooting. But once again, this is big news because states like New York, Connecticut, and several others have these sensitive places where you cannot carry a firearm. This stems from a case of Wolford versus Lopez. And this has been an ongoing case. The Supreme Court granted a writ of certiorari because Hawaii's law was very vague in what they call vampire rule on when and where you can carry firearms. But the complainants in this case, two people last name Wolford and several others, and Hawaii's gun rights group, stated that it was a violation of the Second and Fourth Amendments. Now, of course, this is Hawaii. So as it was going through the circuit courts, which are all blaming liberal, they obviously voted against the plaintiffs and for the defendants. Now the Supreme Court has decided we're going to take up this case. The biggest problem is that all the plaintiffs in this case are from Maui. With this law, 96.4% of Maui, or the county of Maui, you would not be allowed to carry a firearm in for self-defense. Now, I want to get into this article here to get more details. Now, just realize as I read this article, this is CNN. CNN is a propagandist for the Democrat Party, which means they are fully on board with everything the Democrats do. So just keep that in mind as I go through this, because it's going to have a slant on it, despite the fact that they call themselves unbiased and impartial journalists, but they're not. But just realize while I'm reading. But let's come in here. Supreme Court takes case that would allow more guns in malls and restaurants. Like I said, it's going to come with a slant. The Supreme Court agreed Friday to decide if states may bar people from carrying guns on private property without permission of the property owner, wading into a thorny Second Amendment dispute that could expand carrying rights in malls, restaurants, and stores. It is the first major Second Amendment case the 6-3 conservative court, notice they have to point that out, has agreed to hear in more than a year. In recent years, the court has decided a number of high-profile Second Amendment cases in ways that have expanded access to guns. The court granted 5 new cases on Friday as it builds out a new term that will begin on Monday and run through June. I'm going to skip that, come down to here. In the guns case, Hawaii enacted this law in 2023 is Hawaii Act 52. In response to the Supreme Court's Bruin decision, obviously, that made it easier for Americans to obtain carry permits. That decision struck down a New York law that required residents to show proper cause to carry a handgun. The appeals court was absolutely right to say it's constitutional to prohibit guns on private property unless the owner says they want guns there, said Janet Carter, managing director of the Second Amendment litigation at Everytown Law. What other slant are they going to come with? This law respects people's right to be safe on their own property, and we urge the Supreme Court to uphold it. The only problem is that private property that is fully accessible to the public. We're not talking about somebody's home here. We're talking about parks, malls, bars, on and on. We're not talking about somebody's house. We're talking about places that people congregate, not somebody's personal home that they invite people over to. This is a bar or restaurant, so forth and so on. So her argument is stupid. Previously, the states allowed someone with a permit to carry their handgun into a store, for instance, unless the property owner explicitly prohibited it. The new law flipped that around and required unambiguous written or verbal authorization. The law also barred the carry of guns on beaches and in parks, as well as bars and restaurants that serve alcohol. 3 gun owners who hold carry permits sued, thus Wolford, along with the gun rights group claiming the new law and an appeals court decision upholding it rendered illusory the right to carry in public. 5 states, Hawaii, California, Maryland, New Jersey, and New York, enacted similar restrictions according to the Trump administration, which urged the Supreme Court to hear the case. The administration told the High Court that people could bring bicycles, roller skates, protest banners, muddy shoes, dripping umbrellas, melting ice cream cones into private stores without permission. Quote, only if somebody wants to carry a gun must he obtain express authorization under the arbitrary presumption that all property owners would view guns differently, the Department of Justice said. And Lopez, the Democratic Attorney General of Hawaii, argued that the state's law represents a permissible effort to vindicate the rights of Hawaii citizens to exclude armed individuals from their private property. Federal District Court in Hawaii preliminary barred the state from reinforcing the law, but the San Francisco-based 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that decision. What a shock. Quote, nothing in the text of the Second Amendment or otherwise suggests that a private property owner, even owners who open their private property to the public, must allow persons who bear arms to enter the appeal court, wrote in an unanimous opinion. But undergirding the fight over Hawaii's law is the Supreme Court's requirement that judges look to U.S. history when deciding whether to uphold or strike down gun prohibitions under the Second Amendment. In its 2022 decision, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, the court said that a gun regulation must be consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Of course, we know. Immediately, we had a flurry of arguments and lawsuits and so forth and so on. I don't need to get into that. So let me go ahead and come out of that. So finally, the Supreme Court is going to take on a case that is going to have national repercussions, which is great. And of course, as you said, like I said, this article's from CNN. So there's the slant right there. You immediately have to point out conservative 6-3 court. What does that have to do with anything? This is the constitutional law of the land. And they are there to interpret the Constitution, period. So I'm looking forward to this. Of course, if anybody's been watching me for a while, you know I'm waiting with bated breath for a assault weapons ban case to be heard in the court. Not a writ of certiorari, not, a stay. I want a case to go before the court and for them to say yes or no, this is constitutional or it's not. That's what I'm waiting for. But this is a big deal because it's going to end a lot of those sensitive places, areas like California has a lot of them. New York definitely has them. You heard those states, Hawaii, Maryland, and so forth. So it's going to end all that nonsense because, it just blows my mind. Once again, you think about it. Do you think criminals actually sit there and go, there's a law that says I can't do this? Of course not. It doesn't happen. So, once again, we don't need government overreach. We need people to have common sense and police themselves. But we'll see how this goes. Now, Here's the problem. Once again, this is another issue I have with the courts. They're going to hear it this year, and we won't have a ruling till next year. Come on. But that's our system. But let me know what you think. As always, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, any statements of violence or statements that lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified the next time a video goes live. I'm going to see you on the next one. Peace.